Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Doyle Bailey, and I am here to share with you an SEL 101 for educators. This is a content webinar for school administrators, counselors, anyone who wants to utilize it for your own professional development. And I put together a series, and this is the first in the series. So I'd like to start this by sharing my screen and starting the slideshow from the beginning. Again, this is SEL 101 and mindfulness for educators. We'll begin really by talking about emotional intelligence, and Dr. Daniel Goleman was the first really to introduce and popularize the idea of emotional intelligence. This began in 1995, and since then really the concept of social emotional learning has spread really from the corporate world to the world of education. CASEL is a collaborative for academic social emotional learning, and they have done a wonderful job in providing the educators of the world a framework to assist all students and educators in becoming more productive and caring people. And this really begins with us as human beings really understanding our own emotional intelligence, who we are based on where we've been, how we were raised, the supports that we have received along the way, and really the people that help buffer and shape who we are in the world. So according to Dr. Daniel Goleman, EQ really consists of 4 primary attributes. And the first one is self-awareness. The second one is self-management. The third is social awareness. And the fourth is relationship management. And really there's a scaffolding, right? There's we begin with just our self-awareness, understanding our own emotions, our thoughts and our feelings, and how those things impact our behaviors. And then we begin to develop a self-management, really our ability to control our impulses and our feelings, self-control, stress management, and really the impact that those things have on our ability to follow through with commitments and to adapt to different situations. Social awareness is really our ability to step into somebody else's shoes and to take a deeper look at the perspective of having empathy and compassion for other people. And it really feels, it's about having a level of concern for humanity really, and recognition of values in equity, being able to have an understanding and a level of understanding or ability to want to understand people different from ourselves. And relationship management is really the understanding of how to develop healthy and maintain nurturing, committed relationships. And that really begins with the relationship that we have with ourselves. Emotional intelligence is really educating the heart and the mind. And Aristotle said that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. So it's something for us to really sit and think about when we contemplate, what we're doing as educators and how we're doing it. Are we building just that? Are we stuck in that urgent way of kill drill mentality and teaching first grade or second grade or high school or middle school? Or are we really thinking about that we're teaching human beings to become good people in the world? And that's really about having congruence between the heart and the mind and the brain. So this is CASEL's wheel. CASEL is, again, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. And CASEL did a really nice job of defining SEL for education as the process through which children and adults understand and manage their emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for other people. That's really that social management, establish and maintain positive relationships. And then they go a step further and they talk about responsible decision making. And this is what the CASEL wheel looks like. Again, we start over here with self-awareness, move over to self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. This begins with the self, and we can see that setting that awareness for our classroom. It really changes the climate and culture of our schools, and it filters out into our homes and our communities as well. So as we think about and begin this journey of SEL for ourselves, for adults, we begin with self-awareness, which is really self-reflection. And self-awareness is that ability to recognize my own emotions, right? And how my emotions are going to impact my thoughts and behaviors. Really helps us to understand my own strengths and maybe weaknesses or gaps in there, and helps me develop my own identity or agency. And that ultimately then spills over to others. What I think of myself, how I see those things about myself, will manifest in how I see and perceive other people. So this is really the case for us to work on our improving our own self-awareness. It helps us to have improved relationships, improved mood, clear thinking, better judgment, more effective communication, and it really increases our productivity. So there are a lot of companies in the world who are building in practices to improve our own self-awareness, such as mindfulness, that have shown there's research that supports and shows that this increases productivity. When we have individuals who are more highly connected to the self and not in that automaticity or robotic sort of way, that urgent sort of way, but really taking a step back, understanding what is it that I need right this minute and how do I meet those needs, then they're more effective communicators, and their teamwork is able to be more effective, and they're able to increase their overall productivity. L.L. Bean, Jackson Laboratory in Maine are two such places that incorporate emotional intelligence building for their employees, and also providing opportunities to practice mindfulness, which we'll get to in a little bit. So a self-awareness assessment is something really for us to consider. Am I aware of my emotions, my culturally grounded beliefs, my backgrounds, and am I aware of them in such a way that they're precursors to my emotional reaction as I understand the impact of social teaching and the practices that I have and what I bring for and to my students? I understand when I have a high awareness of self, I can understand how my students will respond, both perceived by me responses in a positive or negative way, and how my emotions can impact really those. Remember, we talk a lot about, if you've been in my content webinars before, we talk about the mirror neurons and how we're really kinetically related, right? And that if I come into a classroom or come into my home and I'm upset, my family or my students are going to feed off that energy. Whereas the opposite is true if I come into my home or come into a classroom setting or my work environment and I'm calm and I'm cool and I'm mindful, then other people are going to feel that from me. And so we mirror one another. So being aware of where you are really has a strong impact and influence on your instructional teaching practices with your students. When we think about self-awareness and really looking at it leveraged through the lens of equity, we talk about examining the importance of various social identities, deriving constructive, positive meaning from social identities, and really being grounded and affirming in our own cultural heritage and allowing and accepting of others who are coming from diverse cultural heritages, and being curious and interested instead of afraid and judging. So I love this, this little phrase here: authenticity requires self-awareness, self-awareness requires reflection. And so what we're asking is, am I able to identify and recognize and name my emotions in any particular moment? Am I able to recognize the relationship between the feelings I'm having and the reactions that I produce to people and situations? So taking small moments, just small moments out of your day, like this small moment that we could have. When I teach children, I have them put one hand over their heart, invite them, not have, but it's always an invitation. Hand on their heart and hand on the tummy. And just take a second, breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, and asking yourself, how am I feeling? Noticing what comes up for you. Are you feeling calm? Are you feeling agitated? Where does that feeling live in my body? And if I'm not in a space or place where the feeling is going to help support my teaching or my interactions with human beings, what can I do about that so that I can shift that? So before we can expect students to be self-aware, we have to demonstrate self-awareness. We have to demonstrate what that looks like and practice it. That means we have to have an accurate self-perception, knowing that I am realistic about my strengths and my limitations and not seeing it through the lens of judgment or criticism, and knowing that I can encourage others to tell me how my actions have affected them without being defensive or frustrated or feeling as though I'm being judged. And an accurate self-perception is really knowing how my own needs and biases and values are affecting ultimately the decisions that I make in the world. I don't know that many of you have been taught truly to sit in moments of self-reflection. I know that I didn't. I never had that opportunity. Nobody ever taught me to do that until I was about, 45 years old. And I went to Tufts University for a 4-day mindfulness meditation retreat. And it was then that I started noticing other people slowing down and taking small moments. And the invitations were for us to reflect often, checking in with the self. Do I need a break? Do I need to breathe? Do I need a drink of water? Do I need to use the restroom? Not going like a robot through the paces of our lives, but truly checking in with ourselves. We're really not meant to be a human doing. We're a human being. So really having time to reflect on that. What do I need? Where does that feeling live? Self-confidence is another big piece of developing accurate self-awareness, believing that I have what it takes to influence my own destiny and leading others effectively, feeling confident that I can handle whatever comes along with a calm self-assurance and a relaxed presence. This isn't something that I have ever been conditioned or led or shown how to do. We ask a lot of students to pay attention on purpose, to listen on purpose, to see on purpose, but I don't know that many of us take the time to really cultivate and practice that for ourselves. So knowing about self-reflection allows me to build that self-confidence and optimism, really believing that most experiences will really help me to learn and grow, that they're here to be a teacher in my life and not to be just always a roadblock. Seeing the positive and negative situations. And we know that really has been contingent upon what's happening in my neurological systems, of which we will get to. So that's talking about how are we hardwired for our emotions and our behaviors? What does the puzzle of us look like? And it starts really with understanding the brain. So the human brain is a very complex network of neural pathways. Works really right. The brain works optimally when we feel safe, connected, and in right relationship with ourselves and others. There's so many components to the brain, and all of them need to be supported by the neurochemistry that allows for us to be in our prefrontal cortex. So we're going to talk about that next. The prefrontal cortex is really your high-level thinking brain. It's your reasoning and your executive functioning brain. It is where empathy and insight and responsivity and emotional regulation, it's body regulation, understanding, tapping into intuition and feeling attuned to your communication, being able to modulate when fear comes. When the thinking brain is there, it's supported by neurochemistry like dopamine and oxytocin. And those are those feel-good neurochemicals and hormones that allow us to feel centered and okay. The limbic brain is the part of the brain that taps us into that fight, flight, freeze. And it's there to help us survive. But when it is activated, so the amygdala, in converse, is really that protecting brain. And that's the area of the human brain that looks like small almond shaped. It's just behind your prefrontal cortex. And it's really the guard dog and acts as acts hypervigilant for fear. And the amygdala doesn't understand the difference or perceived threat that is conjured up in the mind or from a limbic response in the body or real danger. Its only job is to keep us safe. And so when we're grounded and centered and calm and the neurochemistry supports that, then we're able to tap into the prefrontal cortex. And when we're heightened in our awareness or a little embarrassed or overwhelmed or ashamed or scared, confused, then the amygdala starts to get supported by the change of neurochemistry through cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. And so Dr. Dan Siegel has adopted this hand-brain model, and a lot of you use that, where this with kids, when you're teaching these concepts, that this is the thinking brain here. It's where all big learning takes place. And this is what you want your children, your students who come through the door to have on. But if they're a little overwhelmed or a little upset or a little afraid, then the thinking brain neurochemistry kind of slows down, right? This is a simplistic way to think about it. And the protecting brain begins to activate. And so then the protecting brain will activate and react to instead of respond to the situation. And so there's always information coming in, and it will be directed from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex unless there's danger, perceived or real threat. And then the amygdala will take charge. So stress is something that every single one of us deal with all the time. And it makes every system of our heart, mind, and body go into something. And everyone feels stress, and there really is no way not to. But not all stress is bad, but it's the toxic stress, the toxic chronic levels of stress that have serious impacts on our overall health and well-being. So as you can see by this slide, the body, the mind, emotions, and behavior are all impacted by stress and the levels of stress that we have. So in the body, we could have headaches and infections and muscles that are always on guard. You know, your shoulders are up by your ears. You can develop fatigue, skin irritations. You can become breathless. In the mind, stress looks like worry and inaccurate judgment, indecisiveness, negativity, hasty decisions, right? The reactive mind. You know, behaviors could be clumsy, accident prone, loss of appetite. You can be drawn to things that aren't really healthy, drinking or smoking, insomnia. And emotions, we can have loss of confidence. We can be fussy or irritable, depressed, be lethargic, apprehensive, indecisive, those kinds of things. So toxic stress is chronic stress, and it's one of the most critical issues in society today. Again, everyone feels stress, but chronic and toxic stress is very, very unsafe for us. And when we're caught up into that automatic, just slogging through the lives, and we don't slow down to breathe, and we don't slow down to assess how am I feeling and where does that feeling live in my body, then stress can become super dangerous for us. And this is just a little diagram of how health and coping and stress are all interdependent. And I just thought it was really interesting for us to note that according to the American Psychological Association, chronic stress is linked to the sixth leading cause of death in human beings: heart disease, cancer, lung accidents, cirrhosis of the liver, and suicide. Stress is one of 6 leading causes of death in humanity. More than 75% of all physicians' offices visits are for stress-related complaints or illness and ailments. It's more than 75%, which is something that we can reverse and ultimately reverse the long-term impact to our health and well-being. So there are 3 major stress hormones that are really important for us to understand. And as we're self-reflecting, we can think about, okay, this is cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine running through my body, impacts my central nervous system. My heart starts beating faster. Blood pressure rises. My body is preparing to go into fight, flight. There's some perceived threat. My musculoskeletal system tenses up. I can get a headache. I'm ready to pounce. I'm like the tiger. my respiratory system, my breathing starts to quicken, and my heart starts to race. Endocrine signals are sent from glands to the body that release the cortisol so that we can get into that fight mode. And my gut starts to feel yucky, right? I get butterflies. I feel like my stomach's flipping. So these are all kind of visceral body signals that are happening when stress occurs. And if chronic stress is there, this is happening all the time. So we're hyper vigilant and we never feel good. So what does cortisol do? Cortisol is the most common known stress hormone, and it's produced in our adrenal glands. And when our adrenals release cortisol into the body, there's a multi-step process that includes other hormones. And when there's constant surges of cortisol, this can result in the reduction of fibers carrying the electrochemical messages between the motor neurons. And so what happens is there's an interruption in those motor neurons being triggered in the prefrontal cortex, and I can't make good decisions. This is so if I'm driving in a car and a deer runs out in front of my car, and maybe I'm listening to the music in the car, or I'm having a conversation with somebody in the back or next to me, and I quickly react, boom, I get a surge of danger. My body reacts, cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine start moving through my body, and I do that quick reaction. I will not, in that time, and in several moments after, sometimes hours after, be able to recall the conversation I was having, who I was talking to, or the song that was playing on the radio, or even where I was going, what my plan was for the day, because my prefrontal cortex has really been it's been shut off. There's no way for me to acquire that. So my long-term memory, my working memory, my reasoning, my executive function, my responsible decision-making has been taken away from me. Now think about this with your students. Think about children, big and small, who come from stressful environments and are always in that stressed fight, flight, freeze, hypervigilant place. They're always looking for danger. This is what's happening. Their body neurochemistry is not supporting their ability to tune into you and what you're trying to teach them. So that's where that self-reflection, being curious and noticing the student and noticing what the behavior of the student is saying to you, so you can pay attention to what he or she needs, so that you can help reduce that hypervigilance in your classroom. We'll get into what co-regulation looks like next time when we talk about self-management. But basically just wanted to give you an overview of what happens when these chemicals and hormones become alert. So adrenaline, right? I don't know that everyone's going to have the adrenaline in their system to jump off a mountain with a pack and hope that the parachute opens, but we need adrenaline, right? We need it when we're about to take big leaps, when we get a new job, when we step up to bat, when we're talking to somebody new, when we're developing new relationships, when we want to impress somebody or we want to impress ourselves. We do something new for the first time. Adrenaline is something that we need, but toxic levels, just like cortisol, when adrenaline is produced in those adrenal glands and quickly floods our body, the body cannot process the amount of adrenaline that's going, and we got that adrenaline high. It's for that real quick reaction. This is why some folks, say this is what moms need when they give birth. We need adrenaline to just be able to push that baby. It's what mothers and fathers, people can get that superhuman strength lifting cars off somebody. There's just that a whole surge of quick reaction hormones that are allowing us to do something that we normally wouldn't be able to do. It's great when we need it, but it is very dysregulating when we don't. And so if I've got adrenaline running through my body all the time, then my neurochemistry is not supporting prefrontal cortex learning of anything new. And then the last one that we really want to talk about today is norepinephrine. And this is a stress hormone also produced in the adrenal glands and in the brain. And it's responsible for the arousal and the results of blood shunting to areas, spelled that wrong, which need to react quickly. So large muscles, so I can get out of there. It releases in decreased blood supply to other areas, which we don't need. So like my skin, my eyes, my hearing. So I will only see what's directly in front of me. I will only hear, you know, what the, maybe just the thrumming of blood in my ears or my heart pounding. It's meant for me to get the heck away, so that, you know, if I see the tiger, I won't get eaten. It's my survival. So thinking about this, how big is your stress? And knowing about teachers these days are under a great deal of stress. Everyday teachers are under stress. But with COVID-19 and all of the remote learning and all of the things, the expectations and the degree of uncertainty, our stress is up to our eyebrows. And just thinking about how are we going to get back to school and how is this going to work for people, you know, and our students, and am I red, am I green, am I yellow? It can be very stressful. If we are not self-aware, we can get mired in that stress. The stress takes over and we are not able to make, you know, good sound decisions about things. Here's what you've been doing for a long time, and you've been doing it for a really long time in a really great way. Stress leads to teacher burnout, and teacher burnout syndrome is real. Emotional exhaustion, low personal fulfillment, and depersonalization are three of the most common factors in teacher burnout syndrome. Emotional exhaustion is just what it says. Feeling of powerlessness can lead to insomnia, chronic headaches, intestinal problems. You know, you find yourself in the classroom and your gut's always turning. You don't feel like you have any power to make any positive change. It's not a good feeling. Low personal fulfillment. I don't feel like I'm just so overwhelmed by the demands of my job. This translates into feelings of failure, extending to my personal life, and impacts really every aspect of my life. And then the depersonalization is really an important factor for us to really be aware of. When this happens, we become increasingly desensitized to the needs of myself and others, including our students. Maybe the passion for our job and our life starts disappearing. Really, we start noticing disappointment setting in, and work can become mechanical. We notice that we're just slogging through the motions. And this is when we're being in a mindless, just robotic place. This is not where self-awareness wants to be. This is where you are really not aware at all. So this is when we ask ourselves, are we a human being or a human doing? A human being is characterized by a receptive, active listener, patient, present, nurturing, accepting, flexible, curious, non-judgmental. A human doing is the person below. I'm busy, I'm controlling, I'm restless, I question everything, I'm a planner, I'm an organizer, I'm a thinker, I'm a talker, I'm reactive, I walk, talk, chew gum, quickly, judging, you know, woe is me, victimization. And these things are, without our knowledge, if we don't tap into who we are, then we will just morph into a human doing, because life can just keep packing it on and we can keep letting it unless we become self-aware. So it's time for us to pause. One of the things that I do when I teach students about self-awareness and teach adults about self-awareness is really for us to take a second. So maybe just take out a piece of paper and jot down, how am I feeling right in this moment? Where does that feeling live in my body? Am I reacting to my life right in this moment, or am I responding to my life? Are my shoulders up by my ears? Can I relax them? Can I give myself an invitation and permission to be present? Can I soften my eyes, feel my feet anchoring me onto the floor, feel my body being supported by the chair? Just notice the contact, where your arms are making contact with your seat or by the clothing that they feel on your sides. Can you notice your feet inside of your shoes? The pounding of your heart? Can you notice the in-breath and the out-breath, and the rise and fall of your heart and your stomach? Just take a couple seconds just to breathe in through our nose, filling our lungs and our belly. holding just for a second and out through our mouth. And in through our nose and out through our mouth. And one last time, in through our nose and out through our mouth. Taking small moments like that, it's called breathing on purpose. It's just a great way for you to multiple times a day just check in with yourself. So you stop the helter-skelter, movement, a hectic, frenetic pace, and just allow your body to go back to a place of regulation. Jon Kabat-Zinn is the master of mindfulness. He is the master of mindfulness-based stress reduction, and he would say, check in with yourself often, as if your life depended on it. So we can be out on the wire and hanging on by the thread of by the fingers on our, by our fingertips, or we can check in and know we have a lifeline, because knowledge is really power, right? And our brain is incredibly structured and neuroplastic, and we possess every ability to learn and cope in new ways with stress. But first we have to shift away from human doing and lean more into human being. And that means taking moments. And you have to be able to give yourself permission to take a moment to notice where you are, to be mindfully aware of who I am, where I am, and not even thinking about where we're going, because it doesn't matter in that one small moment. It's not the big picture. It's really bringing yourself in and thinking, where am I right this minute? This begins with a practice called self-compassion. And self-compassion is truly just really understanding the need to be warm and towards ourselves. When we feel suffering, when we fail, when we feel inadequate, rather than ignoring the pain and pushing it away and identifying with that as ugly and we're inept and we self-criticize, we say, I'm suffering, I'm feeling it, and it's okay. I'm human, I'm doing my best, I am enough. So having a practice of self-compassion daily, working that into your self-awareness, is really embedding into your own thinking a purposeful intention of, I am going to be okay, and I am going to give myself permission to be okay with failures, big and small, and that mistakes do not identify who I am in the world. They're really here as a teacher. If I make a mistake, I can correct it and go this way. We do this all the time with our students. But remember, if you have students that are lid flippers, that are always in their back brain protection, they are not going to listen to you say you're okay unless you practice being okay. And practice it often and talk about it and say, we're learning this new skill, we're learning how to like ourselves and be okay with ourselves. And it sounds really hokey and it sounds really new agey, but really it's about helping the brain that is hardwired for fear, helping the brain that's hardwired for reactivity to come into a place of responsiveness. And we do that by being okay on purpose. So there are elements to self-compassion. It's really recognizing the imperfect failings and shortcomings and experiencing life's difficulties with the notion that, yeah, life is sometimes difficult. And if we don't have difficulties, then we never, ever, ever really truly understand the joy of and the satisfaction of something that's done well, and how when we do something well and all the pieces fall together, that we can celebrate that. If we didn't have shortcomings, if we didn't have failures, both big and small, we never would know what those epic successes feel like. We would be dull, and we can't always be exactly where we want to be in every single moment. And more importantly is we can't deny ourselves the feelings when we feel disappointed, when we feel ashamed. And it is okay to suffer a little bit in that. It's just not okay to stay mired in that self-loathing or the criticism. Just be gentle. I'm experiencing sadness. I feel sad. I am not a sad person. I feel sad. All emotions are okay. What's not okay is getting stuck in any emotion that doesn't serve our human mindfulness in any good way. So self-compassion, really recognizing suffering and personal inadequacy, and it's part of the human experience. It's something we'll all go through. Not one person on the planet Earth will get out of life without some suffering. But having self-compassion means that we then can, as we evolve that skill, lend that and give compassion to other people so that we can say to somebody else, I've been there, I know how it feels, and you're not alone. And if we don't do that, if we don't give that, cultivate that self-compassion, then we will more times than not look at others, including our students and even people in our own family, through the lens of judgment. And that just causes a strife and defensiveness. So being balanced in mind, heart, and body is what compassion and self-compassion is about. It requires taking a balanced approach to our negative emotions so that our feelings are not suppressed or exaggerated. It's an equilibrated stance, and it stems from this personal okayness. I am suffering. I don't have to stay in a suffering place. Looking at yourselves from a larger picture and not always having to know the answers of what life's lessons are trying to teach us, but just to know that this didn't work, but this doesn't define me. And when we cultivate that, a balance or congruence in our heart, brain, and our mind and our body, then we can live with more balance so that there isn't always, it's an all or nothing sort of situation. Nothing ever good happens to me. Other thing, it always happens well for her or him. So we aren't comparing ourselves constantly by our shortcomings. This is really a case for mindfulness. Mindfulness is really about being present right here, right now on purpose. It's with curiosity and interest. It is without judgment. It's being still in small moments, multiple times a day. It's giving ourselves permission to stop and to reflect. How am I feeling? Where does that feeling live in my body? And breathing 3 slow, deep breaths. We'll take a second right now just for self-reflection. I'm going to be moving into just what mindfulness is and a few mindful practices for you. In through our nose, out through our mouth, in through your nose, out through your mouth, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Some say that mindfulness is really the key to self-awareness, and I truly believe this is true. When we are mindless, then we are in that automaticity of our life, right? Go here, go here, go here, go here, do this, do that. Never really slowing down and never appreciating or really reflecting on what's right in front of me. So mindfulness is a non-judgmental, receptive mind. It's a way to feel the feelings as they come about, not trying to suppress them or deny them or ignoring the pain. At the same time, mindfulness really requires that we don't over-identify, right, with the thoughts or the feelings, so that we don't get caught up and go onto that thought or feeling and get carried away by them. So that's the balance: noticing, acknowledging, and letting go, or sitting with the feeling for a little bit and then allowing it to move as we're no longer needing it. So paying attention. Do I have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? I think all educators in the state of Maine and across the country and probably the globe know about growth mindset and fixed mindset. Carol DeWick has done a great job in helping her research, which was really about having a growth mindset and what happens when human beings have a growth mindset and human beings have a fixed mindset. Mindfulness practices truly just, bottom line, help us shift our mindset into a growing. When we have a higher self-awareness and a higher self-competency, then we are able to pay attention to what comes about, and it helps us develop agency. Again, not having to identify and be who what we feel, but allowing the feelings to be part of who we are. So the invitation, really, if you're doing this professional development, is to develop a practice, a daily practice of gratitude. Gratitude really is the essence of good health. Even if my health isn't great, it could be worse. There's always somebody out there that's dealing with more than we are. So there's something we can be thankful for. We can be thankful if we have a couple dollars in the bank or a couple dollars in our pocket. If we have a few coins, we have some things stuffed in our mattress, we can be grateful that we have a job. Even if you don't like your job, you can be grateful that you're employed. You can be grateful for good friends. Don't forget your good friends and your family. Freedom of religion, your parents who brought you into this world, and you would not be here without them. You can be thankful if you have a weekend off, have a wonderful partner, if you have a pet in your life. You can be thankful and grateful that we live in a country where we can have human rights and voice and agency. And man, if we aren't experiencing this right now with the death of George Floyd and the understanding that we have got to teach courageously, and that means we need to be self-reflective courageously. What am I thinking? How am I thinking this? And how are my perceived thoughts and my implicit biases impacting and my relationships, my right relationships with people, with humanity? That's what we're here for, to do. We're here to become intentional. So while we're washing our hands and brushing our teeth and waiting in line in the store, listen on purpose, see on purpose, breathe on purpose, practice being patient. When you're in the grocery store and you have the mask on your face and there are 3 people ahead of you and it's hard to breathe, notice that you still can, and be aware and say, I'm practicing being patient. I'm practicing. Notice when you're washing your hands, become intentional and feel the water, feel the soap, notice the texture, notice the sensation, notice the temperature of the water. Listen on purpose, listen mindfully. What is the person saying? Not paying attention to the responses or reactions that you're conjuring up in your mind. Seeing, go for that walk, see the colors, feel the temperature outside and inside, breathe on purpose. That's what intentionality is. So breathing on purpose is really called focused breathing. Focused breathing is really just a simple practice that allows us to slow our heart rate, lowers the blood pressure, and sharpens our mental focus. Remember, when we think about it from a brain place, when we're in a mindful breathing, focused breathing, we're just breathing in through the nose, holding for a little bit, letting the lungs expand, letting the belly expand, full capacity, and out through the mouth. Breathing on purpose is the first mindful skill, and it goes hand in hand with something called beginner's mind. It's about noticing that the mind will wander and breathing and not conjuring up that I'm not good at this. Just commit to 5 minutes a day of focused breathing. Do it in the morning, do it in the afternoon. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Some people like to do a count of 5 as they breathe in through their nose, holding an exhalation of 7 or 8, whatever's comfortable for you. But just carve out times to really slow down, to really help regulate the nervous system, to really rebalance the neurochemistry. What I did is I put on for you a mindful breathing practice. So feel free to click on that site and walk you through a mindful breathing that I also have done for the Department of Education, and that's on the website under the mindful content. So noticing everything is part of a grounding practice, but really this is about using your sensory systems to be aware of everything. So breathing and noticing, what do you hear? Breathing and noticing, what do you see? Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, what do you smell? Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, what do you feel? Do you feel hair on your face? Do you feel tickles on your shoulders? Do you feel temperature? Do you feel your chair supporting you? Do you feel your feet in your shoes? Do you feel jewelry making contact with spaces and places on your skin? This is really the practice of grounding, and it really helps us shift out of automaticity to really purposefulness. Letting your notices float by like clouds in the sky is one of the critical elements of mindful practice. Letting go is very tricky. The mind likes to loop and it likes to perseverate. It's one of the best things that we do. We're really good at it as human beings. And so as you notice thoughts and memories or plans surfacing, you can just acknowledge them and first invite them to pass by as if they were clouds in the sky, or you can let them sit for a minute or a few seconds. Notice how it feels to have them hang around. Whatever comes up for you, just notice it with curiosity and interest. So notice I'm thinking or remembering or planning, and notice that and know that that's a very natural, normal thing that will happen. Expecting the mind to wander. Brain Science, Harvard 2018 notes the human mind will wander 47% of the time that we're awake. We will engage in a thought, have a memory, or make a plan. And this is just busyness of the mind. Some people have written about monkey mind, or there's a children's book called Puppy Mind. You know, teaching our children and our students about mind wandering is a very, very, very valuable tool. Because when we practice mindful breathing and we teach ourselves and then can also teach our students about mind wandering, then we're able to have some power and agency over this tool. And so if our mind is just constantly wandering and we get caught up in that, then it can impact our emotional regulation. And if we are triggered by a memory or a thought or a plan that causes us to react rather than respond, then the neurochemistry will follow that. So when we can practice being calm in small moments throughout our day, then we're re-establishing balance throughout our neurochemistry, and we will be more apt to be a responsive person rather than a reactive person. If you have been a patterned reactive person, and I don't know, everybody's childhood is our own. We all know about ACEs. We all know about adverse childhood experiences. We know that what trauma does to the body and to the brain and to the heart. We know that. What we don't know is what do we do about it? And so this is a skill that we can adopt and we can transfer to our students. We can do this if we're in real time with them, and we can also do this from a remote learning platform. Just be courageous enough to say to your students, and practice with your own family, I'm learning about self-awareness. I'm growing my emotional intelligence. I'm practicing on purpose, being intentional with my thoughts. I'm noticing when my mind is beginning to wander. And it's okay. There's something super powerful about when students, big and small, start to know that maybe it's the brain and maybe it's their reaction to things that cause them to have these behaviors, and then they have agency or choice about how to do that differently. It's a beautiful thing. I've been in education for 30 years. Teaching students about the heart and the brain and the mind has been such an amazing shift for me. I haven't always done it. I would say within the past 7 to 10 years, I've really been really practicing mindful self-awareness and self-regulation, and it's a powerful tool to teach any student. Anchoring is a mindful practice that allows you and me to bring myself back. So when the mind is wandering, and remember that's the tool of the mind, and the mind will do it 47% of the time that we're awake, maybe even more if we're mired in a place of reactivity. If anything comes about that causes me to be afraid or embarrassed or overwhelmed or concerned, then I'm going to get on that train. So anchoring helps us not leave the port, not leave the station. So as I'm sitting and practicing a mindful breathing, and I'm noticing, and I'm breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, And the intention is that I will do this for 3 to 5 minutes, but I notice that my mind is it's perseverating and it's just wandering, and there's just nonstop wandering. Anchoring allows us to bring us back to the practice of breath. So it just brings you back to this place here and now. So as we notice the memory or the thought or the plan surfacing in the mindful breath practice, we are just practicing being with the breath. We say, I'm breathing, I'm here, I'm calm. Whatever phrase or word works for you is your anchor. There's no right or wrong way to do this. What's really important for us to understand when we're practicing mindfulness for self-awareness and building our emotional intelligence is that without the anchor, we drift. And we don't shift or change or grow, and the neuroplasticity of our mind, our brain, does not regenerate in new pathways. It doesn't produce new pathways. So we have to practice things like anchoring without judgment. It doesn't matter if I have a thought. It doesn't matter if I'm breathing and I'm thinking about what I'm going to make for dinner. It doesn't mean that I'm not good at mindfulness. It means that the mind is doing what the mind always does. And when I'm in a human doing mode or an unaware mode and I'm not practicing being reflective, then I will keep doing that. So the anchor is your tool. It's the part that helps you. It's your strategy for staying with it. And don't worry if it doesn't help you right away. Keep up with it. Keep up with, just like math and reading and writing and science, baseball, whatever you do, you're not born just able to do it. You have to put effort into it. And that's what mindfulness is purposeful effort in being present. So practicing non-judgment and replacing it with curiosity and interest. And saying things like, I'm still learning. When you notice the mind is wandering, instead of saying, I can't do this, or there's no use, or this isn't working for me, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. If you use that phrase, and I can't tell you how many times I've used that in the classroom as a speech pathologist collaborating with students and as a mindful practitioner and then as an SEL coach, when students make mistakes and they go into that self-criticism and the blame and the shame, and I say, yeah, you're still learning, I'm still learning, isn't that cool? Something shifts. If I stay in that place of blame and shame, I'm going to believe that about myself. But if I think, yeah, I'm still learning, that gives me power to be confident that there's a new way to do something. So spend some time reflecting on your self-awareness every single day. Keep a mindfulness journal. Write down your feelings, and as you notice them, or write down some feelings that were big for you that day. Remember that emotions drive our attention, and our attention will drive our learning and our love of our life or not. So notice what surfaces, and notice what surfaces when you're doing a mindful breathing practice. Notice what kind of self-talk you're saying to yourself every day. And can you invite yourself to be curious rather than non-judgment? And notice that as you do your mindful practice, and jot it down. And that's what builds our self-awareness. Begin every single day with a mindful intention for self-growth. I am enough. I'm still learning. I'm doing my very best right this moment. I am grateful. And I am worthy. And lastly, share your mindfulness journey with the people you love. Share this with yourself. Share this with your students, your family members. Take small moments to be good to yourself. Breathe on purpose. You are worthy. You are enough. And together we will get through whatever is ahead of us come fall and all year long, because we know that we have the resources, and if we can self-reflect and not stay anchored in a place of fear, and we will not be learning through our amygdala, we'll be accessing our prefrontal cortex, and mindfulness and self-reflection is the best way for us to get through this as unscathed as possible and as healthy as possible. Thank you so much for showing up today, for taking time for this webinar, and I hope that it was beneficial to you. And I'm going to stop the screen share and say to you, may you be well and safe and healthy and happy until I can see you next time. Thank you so much.